Hello everyone, I'm Matt, and I build small plastic robots. Today I'm going to be looking at the 1/144th scale real grade Zaku II from Mobile Suit Gundam. This variant is Char Aznavour's red coloured personal suit. The real grade line is intended to represent the suits as they would appear in reality, influenced by the original Gundam statue that stood in various Japanese locations from 2009 to 2017. The kits were also intended as a showcase of Bandai's newest plastic technology, namely the advanced MS joint system, a fully articulated and pre-built internal skeleton that could be snapped from the runner with little to no construction required. The kits also include large sheets of decals, usually separated into caution style markings, and decals with chrome-like metallic finishes. As one of the first kits in the line, the Zaku II is something of a showcase for all these features, with lots of redesigned aspects for realism, multiple shades of plastic colour, and the full MS joint inner frame and decals. In the Zaku's case, exclusive gimmicks include a mono-eye that moves in tandem with the head, and a pair of springs for use with the leg piping. The classic Zaku weapon loadout is included as well, and like the main kit, it's captured in vastly superior detail against an equivalent high grade. I haven't built a real grade in some time, and certainly not one as early as the Zaku II, so I constructed the basic inner frame to start with, so that I could get a feel for the frame in any points of concern. The early real grades are somewhat notorious for becoming loose and fragile over time as the frame is manipulated, the Zaku in particular having very loose front skirts due to a tolerance issue in the waist. There is also some minimal assembly with the frame, consisting of moving and clicking some joints into place, but it's very straightforward and easy to do. I should also note that the MS joint is essentially just the suit's skeleton, with no head whatsoever, and further assembly will be required for a full master grade style inner frame, as shown in the instructions. With the frame cut out, I decided to build from the head down, as many Gundam instructions advise. In the case of this kit, the instructions actually start with the legs, working to the top of the unit. On the box art of the kit, the Zaku's mouth appeared to have a somewhat silver finish to them, so I decided to paint this. However, I advise against using the usual Gundam markers for this. Runner E, which comprises several parts of the expanded inner frame, is made from ABS plastic, and can react badly to Gundam marker, causing crumbling or shattering of parts, something I learned the hard way a very long time ago. I decided to use a metallic silver Sharpie, providing a similar finish and coverage without the threat of damaging the part. I used Sharpies again when painting the eye. The piece is cast in clear plastic, with the intention being that you apply the supplied sticker over the piece. I initially just coloured the piece in with a dark pink Sharpie, but once the head was assembled, the eye was rather hard to see within the visor. Instead, I cleaned the piece up with a small plastic eraser, and applied the silver Gundam marker EX, followed by another coat of the Sharpie. The results were far better than with just the Sharpie in my opinion. I would caution however that if you do paint the mono-eye, to ensure the eye is fully pushed into the peg inside the head, otherwise the eye will rub against the visor and the paint will scratch off. Just to be on the safe side, I applied a very light coat of Games Workshop's hard coat varnish to the eye, hopefully providing some extra resilience as well as a greater shine to the part. I would also be careful with the aforementioned pegs in the head, as they are very small and one of mine did develop a stress mark. Construction of the chest and waist is relatively straightforward and it all snaps together cleanly, although I do suggest taking extra care with the nub marks. If not removed properly, they can cause some fitting issues, and others will appear prominent on the surface of the kit and require sanding. One aspect I was very impressed with on both the head and torso was the construction of the Zaku's piping. On this kit, you insert a small tube into the pipes whilst they are on the runner, and then snip the pieces out onto the tube, which is much more efficient than cutting and threading each piece out individually, as I still have nightmares about doing on my master grade Goof Custom. This footage is taken from the leg build, where the plastic tube is substituted for a spring to aid articulation. However, the process is nigh identical for all the tubing on the suit. The only other thing I'd highly recommend is gluing the light red upper chest panels onto the body. They aren't secured especially well when plugged in, and they are small enough that they can and will disappear into your carpet if dropped. The same is true of the side skirts on the kit. They're not as fragile as the front skirts, however if they are manipulated heavily enough they will fall off after a while, so I'd glue them just to be on the safe side. As with the torso, I found the arms snapped together nice and securely, with the joints feeling relatively strong and capable at the moment. The main exception to this is the grey pieces separating the hands and wrists. There are tabs for them to plug into the wrists, but they appear to be too short to truly stay in place. As with the chest pieces, I chose to glue these in place for peace of mind, although I would recommend being a little more cautious with plastic glue than I was here, just in case it overflows and damages any of the lower arm pieces. One rather big error I made whilst building the kit was damaging the circular pieces intended for the outer elbows of the kit. In a classic case of hypocrisy on my behalf, one got stuck in the arm as I hadn't removed the nubs thoroughly enough, and in my attempts to remove it, I essentially destroyed the part. Although I probably had some spare pieces from other Gunpla that could be cemented in place for the same appearance, I instead decided to take influence from the design of the Master Grade RX-78 II from Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin, which includes side joint pieces in both white and grey to represent the suit at different stages of construction. In my case, I simply filled the elbow slots with grey Gundam marker, followed by applying the intended decals over the area to mask the slots for the actual pieces. To be honest, it's not my finest piece of improv. I think I could have done with using a grey paint close to the plastic for one. On a shelf however, I feel like it's an acceptable compromise as it maintains the colour separated and multi-layered appearance of the kit. The build of the legs was definitely the most complex aspect of constructing the Zaku, as tends to be the case with Bandai model kits. However, it's also probably the best demonstration of the MS joint here, with an excellent double knee bend ready to go with the bare minimum of effort. The construction also allows for the upper leg armour to shift with the bend, always a really nice feature that really adds to a kit's looks. Speaking of looks, there's a slightly baffling sticker placement within the MS joint, with a pair of chrome stickers being applied either side of the knees, followed by multiple layers of plastic. Although barely noticeable on the fully constructed kit, it does maintain the amazing level of detail and depth visible throughout, and gives the impression of materials like metal being utilised, which not only serves the kit's real-world inspirations, but it also makes the kit look a lot more expensive as well. At this point in the video, I wanted to show my process for actually snapping out and finishing up a part of the kit, and so I used the feet as an example. To remove pieces from the gate, I use a recently acquired pair of Bandai's own build-up nippers. These are far larger and heavy-duty than my main hobby nippers, a small pair of Tamiyas that I've been using for a while. They don't cut as cleanly, and I find they can be hard to get into certain areas, but they are excellent at getting through large pieces of gate with no issue. I use my Tamiya nippers to slice away the remaining nubs. I should note that the spring in mine did break a while back, in circumstances I'm not entirely sure of. I managed to resurrect them with a mix of super glue, stretching the original spring, and pure dumb luck. I do use an army painter craft knife for any particularly annoying nub marks, but if one's giving me particular grief, I'll usually sand it down. In the past I used a sanding block from the recently departed, and then immediately resurrected, home store Wilco, but when I picked this kit up I finally bought some Bandai sanding sticks and I find them much easier to use. As sanding tends to do though, this will alter the finish of the plastic and create a bit of a mismatch versus other pieces in most cases. I usually rectify this by top coating my kit, but due to the wonderful weather in England at the moment, I might not be able to get this guy finished for quite some time. That and my Zeta Gundam Verkar is first in the queue for top coating, because those waterslide decals are not a joke. I mentioned earlier how I had to wing it regarding the outer joints on my Zaku, and in the name of consistency I left the joint covers off the legs as well. There are two small tabs inside the piece that surrounds those covers, and to mask this I used a black Uniball eye micro pen on them. It's shiny in the video, but when it dried it doesn't look quite as glaring. I also want to mention that I don't recommend these kinds of pens for panel lining. I used it on the grey briefly on this kit, but that was due to my actual Gundam marker exploding halfway through the build, an event which coated a lot of my arm in grey splotches for a few days. These particular Uniball pens don't adhere to plastic especially well I find, and they take a good while to dry as well. My own personal recommendation for an alternative to Gundam markers would be the Unipin fine liner pens. They provide a nice clean line and they come in different colours and sizes for different panel lines. I also believe they use pigmenting, which like the popular Sakura Micron pens, should be safe on plastic. Although I would say they're not quite as strong coverage-wise as a Gundam marker, I have switched back to using Unipins since my Gundam marker exploded, and I've been getting good results with it, so I'd definitely give them a shot if you're interested. With the mobile suit now put together, I found it to be mostly stable, and certainly more solid than I'd anticipated. With that said, the neck joint and front skirts were certainly a point of frustration still, and with the former in mind, I applied a small amount of super glue to the neck joint, making sure it was applied evenly across the ball. I left the joint to dry overnight before reapplying the head. The front skirts were much harder to deal with. In their case, the issue seems to be less with looseness, and more with tightness. I tried a couple of things here, none of which particularly solved the problem, but it did give me a lot of spongy plastic shavings. After scraping some plastic using my knife didn't work, I used a small screwdriver to drill a hole through the sockets. It seems to have provided slightly more clearance to the parts, but they still pop off a fair bit, so it's not the fix I was hoping for. With the kit put together, I moved on to the decals. As mentioned previously, these are separated on the sheet into the normal markings and those with metallic elements. I found them mostly easy to apply, but some did give me trouble. The decals are very thin and adjustments can be tricky, causing damage to the decals in some cases. Surprise surprise, this happened on the front skirts. The back skirt came out fine fortunately, but the front and sides were a write-off, so I replaced them with some decals intended for the weaponry for a relatively similar effect. Not helping matters much, the decal boards are machined extremely precisely in some cases. On the right arm shield, I placed a large A12 decal a little too close to the panel lines, which impacted things slightly when it came to painting them. There is a border around all the stickers as well when applied, and it's more noticeable on some than others. The small chest pieces? No probalo. The giant shield sticks out like a sore thumb in the wrong lighting. For the best results, I recommend approaching these stickers in the same way you'd approach a phone screen protector. Use your fingernail or a piece of card to try and push the air bubbles from under the decal, and to properly push down the edges as well. Make sure to be gentle though, as the last thing you want is scratched or scuffed decals. Some of the decals are also intended for raised areas, but they don't sit especially well, so on my model I chose not to use them. It's also worth mentioning that the decals are somewhat translucent, so when applied properly the plastic colour does show through slightly. This effect may bug some people, but personally I think it makes the decals sit a little better on the model. Finally, I used the shiny decals intended for the arm and leg joints of the kit. I've heard mixed things about the lifespan of these, especially when the kit is regularly reposed, but I decided to give them a try as they do add to the overall look of the kit. You may be able to use Gundam marker on these points instead, but I'm not entirely sure what plastic the MS joints are constructed from, and I didn't want to risk it on the main structure of the model. Luckily, this kit's colour scheme meant that I could panel line it using my brown Gundam marker, which unlike my grey one is still in full working order. It's a very fun kit to panel line, and it cleans up nicely too, as long as you aren't too harsh with your eraser of choice. I use a Mars plastic eraser here, but rubbing alcohol or one of the Gundam eraser pens will do the job as well. I haven't panel lined the weaponry just yet, but I did do some marker work on the Heat Hawk, as I wanted it to stand out compared to my high grade Zaku II's Heat Hawk. As well as the usual yellow blade edge, I decided to paint the rest of the blade in silver, to differentiate the blade from the handle. I reckon a lighter grey Gundam marker would have been more true to the original weapon, but I am easily convinced by shiny marker paint, so I'm quite happy with it. I also painted the cable on the weapon red, because why not? So here's the finished Zaku II, ready to strike a pose and look fantastic whilst doing so, even if it constantly loses its front skirts in the process. That aside, I find posing this thing is pretty straightforward, and it's easy to get into a variety of dynamic poses without much stress, although this is with the extra gluing and whatnot I've done, so I imagine a straight build would be a bit more frustrating to work with. When you pop the model next to the recent high-grade Zaku II, you can really appreciate how much was redesigned on this kit, from the far more mechanical skirting armour to new details like leg thrusters and additional chest pieces. Ultimately, I do prefer the real grade design to that of the high grade. Keeping in mind the high grade is a more stable model kit, and it's also very true to the original Gundam anime. For me, the real grade's strongest points are in its proportions and the armour articulation, particularly that of the shoulders. I also feel the head is better realised on the real grade, especially when compared to the high grade. To wrap up, I think the real grade Zaku II is a really fun build that, although encumbered with some notorious loose pieces and some more global real grade pratfalls like the fragile articulated hands, has mostly paid off for me. It's really impressive to have this level of detail in a high grade sized kit, and the redesign is a spot on modernising of the original design with that iconic Shah colour scheme done justice via different shades of plastic. I'm also really happy with the decals. With a bit of concentration and perseverance, they'll look great applied to the kit, and they really sell the real look the line focuses on. For a kit that's pushing 13 years old now, I think this still holds up really well, and I definitely recommend it as a unique project for builders, especially those with a good chunk of kits under the belt who want something more unique in construction. I definitely wouldn't recommend it as your first Gunpla kit though. If you prefer to collect Gunpla more for the finished build, you may be a bit frustrated by the more fragile areas on the kit, and in that case I'd probably suggest the high grade Origin Zaku II as an alternative. I haven't built that kit, but it takes a lot of design cues from the real grade in terms of decal design and panel lining, and I have heard it's more of a solid end product as well. You may prefer the lighter red pink on the real grade though, as the high grade Origin model has a much deeper red on the head and limbs. And that's all for my real grade Zaku II build. I hope you enjoyed this look into my Gunpla making process, and I'm planning to do more of these videos in the future. Next I'll be building the real grade High New Gundam, seeing just how far real grade evolved in its first decade. If you have any questions about this kit or how I built it, leave a comment and I'll try answering it as best I can. Until next time, take care.